Chapter 52. The Duchess sighed, seeing her child's dreamy gaze. "Oh, how hard you've fallen, daughter. I'm perfectly in control of my emotions. You asked about it anyway, not me. Because I'm your mother and this concerns more than just yourself. All I can tell you is that if you pursue this man, you'll need to be prepared to drag him into a world he's completely unfamiliar with. Your noble duties cannot simply be neglected, and you'll be required to bring him to a majority of affairs since we both know you have many suitors vying for your hand. I'll never arrange your marriage for you, but that means you must take responsibility for your relationships." "I know." Umar nodded solemnly. Dating the daughter of a duchess was a big deal. She had forgotten about that mainly because she never involved herself with much at the magisterium. And when pressured to date, she used her studies as an excuse. But now she was stirring the pot, and both her and John would need to bear the consequences. However, seeing Umar's seriousness, the Duchess couldn't help but chuckle a bit. "Don't be so worried. I have a feeling he'll be able to deal with everything fine considering his occupation. As a delivery man? Indeed." "What does he really do?" Umar asked, her curiosity blazing. But the Duchess shook her head. "He's just a delivery man." "Bullshit. Language." "Unlikely. HMPH, your mouth has become loose." The Duchess smirked and looked out toward the city. "Dear, you know I've been keeping certain realities of this world away from you. But you're growing up, and I won't be able to shield you forever. Of course, your choice to date someone involved in those things isn't helping me. But I understand that sheltering you is no longer as necessary as it had been. So can you tell me about what he does?" "I won't, but I won't stop him from exposing it to you either. However, I've already warned him and I don't believe he'll test me. He's not to involve you in his work. The people he works with and knows are very dangerous individuals. Your identity is under no circumstance allowed to appear in that world. It'll create a huge mess for all of us, even though I wield a lot of power in that sector as well. I have a hard time believing there are people who can pressure you." Umar looked at her mother with scrutiny, but all she earned was a shaken head. "I'm not all-powerful, and power isn't everything. There are those who can match me and have no interest in the royal affairs of the kingdom. They work in the dark, creating entire empires that nobody you see around you will ever know existed. And they who have few rules wield even more influence than I do and fight to secure more power with means I only dare to defend myself with. You, my dear, are leverage capable of being used against me. Do not give them an excuse to make a move by involving yourself, or we'll all regret it. Do you understand that?" "Yes." Umar nodded seriously. It seemed the waters were far deeper than she imagined. She didn't think it was possible for anyone other than the king and other dukes to pressure her mother, but it turns out there were others out there who were more than capable of that, and she didn't even know they existed. The Duchess looked at her daughter. Despite her warnings, she was still curious. John is a special case since he appeared out of nowhere. He has no background to speak of and works a unique job that gives him special immunities. He's lucky. So when you see him, you can tell him that you're allowed to take tours and go to the parties, but by no means are you allowed to operate in any capacity. I won't babysit you, so take it as a learning experience." "Okay." Umar nodded happily. She was finally free. "Also, I want you to come home tomorrow. Your father wants to see you." "Oh." Her happiness subsided with her mother's next comment as she simply dipped her chin. After that, the mother and daughter discussed more business and leisure until ending their dinner later into the night. After heading to the Black Spider Hotel, I greeted my favorite receptionist. "Keymaster." "Ah, it's John. I see you had an eventful time." "You would be correct." "Well, it's good to see you in one piece at least." We shook hands as I nodded. "Yes, no lost limbs, thankfully. Hey, I have a question. A duchess is on the level of a duke, right?" "It is." "Okay. What does it mean to be a duke?" I asked with curiosity, since my original questions from before still hadn't been answered. And unlike the others, the Keymaster simply answered. A duke is someone who has been given a certain level of royal authority by the king. They are at least authority 11 and are given a dukedom. Some dukedoms are entire cities, while some are massive swaths of land beyond the capital. And dukes or duchesses who reach authority 12 are titled Grand Dukes, standing almost equal to the king himself. As for regular dukes, they are often given the responsibilities of managing their territories, as well as certain key positions within the monarchy. So they're a bunch of big shots, I suppose. The keymaster chuckled at my succinct summary, and I was beginning to realize just how important Umara was. She was basically a princess, and her mother was terrifyingly powerful, standing just below the pinnacle of this world. To think Umara actually pursued me first. Somehow, I managed to seduce a princess. Well, she seduced me too. Regardless, I had a feeling that things would be changing rather soon. There was no way dating someone like her wouldn't bring some special consequences. Was I going to have to learn how to act like a noble? I sincerely hoped not. Besides, I was American. The last time we got told what to do by royalty, we shafted those pompous assholes so hard that they fought right off back to their tea-sucking continent. So on one hand, I hoped I wouldn't get put in a position to make things difficult for Umara. On the other hand, I looked forward to a tea party. Have you been embroiled with a duke? The keymaster suddenly asked, making me scratch my head. I may or may not be dating the daughter of a duchess now. Oh my. Teleria. Yay? So tell me, how bad of a position am I in? Well, not so much bad as it is difficult. I suggest you go get a new suit costing around 200 gold bullion, because the boyfriend of Lady Umara Teleria can't be seen as just any ordinary man. You'll have to prove yourself in many different ways. Oh goodness. I sighed in financial pain. It seemed being Umara's boyfriend would prove to be costly. Well, my savings of 1 million coin wouldn't be for nothing. Though perhaps I would need to pick up a few jobs soon. Will my coat not be enough? I'd say it's pretty high-end. Definitely cost more than 200 gold bullion. That depends. In some cases it may be, but if you're going to a formal event, a proper suit is a must. You can't meet the highest nobility in the kingdom wearing a leather coat. I guess I can recommend you to a tailor right here in our market. I get my own suits from him. Oh, I'll take that name. I smiled and got a reference. Apparently the tailor was pretty popular among those who knew him and naturally only carried the best services. After getting that, we talked a bit more before I decided to go. I should get to Maxwell. Of course. Have a good evening, John, and be sure to keep yourself safe outside. I will. With that, I took the elevator and entered the market. I was greeted with the familiar plaza and road with high-class buildings on either side. And down that road was the Polaris family headquarters where Maxwell stayed. After greeting the guards, I went in and found my way to Maxwell's door. After knocking, I shouted, "Housekeeping." What? I stifled a laugh as I went through the door, finding a very confused Maxwell. Oh, it's you. You sound disappointed. Housekeeping may actually have been more welcome. Ouch. I brushed the painful words off and walked over to his desk. Just wanted to check in. Yes, I see you've made significant progress. Are your comprehensions complete? They are. Good. Since you only need accumulation, I'd like you to start coming in every day until you advance. And don't train outside of here anymore. All right. And bring 10 gold bullion the next time you arrive. How about 9? Since you want to be cheap, I'll take 15 now. What? Jumping, I proceeded to negotiate my way down to 13 gold bullion. Afterward, Maxwell chuckled. How naive. Uh-huh. I wanted to ask you about something. Go on. Applications of aura. Plex can turn himself invisible. How do I do that? Maxwell glanced at me with narrowed eyes. Aura techniques are closely guarded secrets. Even I don't possess more than the one I practiced. But that one isn't suitable for you. Where can I get one? Nowhere other than the church or the kingdom. and to attain one from either of them would require you to not only achieve Authority 8, but to have demonstrated that you are assuredly loyal to them. So like crowns, it is not something you can get anytime soon. Until you can, however, you should constantly refine control over your aura. The benefits it will give you are absolutely worth the effort until you attain a technique. Oh. I was a bit disappointed. Yet another thing I would have to wait for. After that, Maxwell waved. All right, you can go. I will prepare for your arrival tomorrow. Until then, recover and stay out of trouble. I'll try. Saying goodbye, I headed out of Polaris and made my way back to the Magisterium. Thankfully I didn't meet any unsavory individuals, allowing me to sleep peacefully that night. Asterisk boom asterisk. Asterisk splat. Asterisk. I fired my shotgun, turning the man's chest before me into a pile of spaghetti. Through my air mask, I only groaned as the knife in my leg stung. Ugh, you know, I didn't consider the possibility of you all working in groups. Asterisk slice asterisk. I ripped the knife out and looked around. There was another dead body besides the fresh one, along with one more hunter. The first hunter was a warlock, and he didn't even get a chance to fire a spell since I promptly parked a bullet in his brain. The other that I just killed was a knight, but not one specializing in strength. Instead, he was shockingly fast. But with the powers of my coat, I was able to keep up and use my shotgun. Now, there was another knight who stood there with 3 bullets in his torso. He wasn't dead yet, but he was bleeding. I didn't know what level they were at, but it didn't seem very impressive. The only wound I received was from that knife, and it was one that the last man standing had thrown at me. Seriously. I don't ask for much other than peace and quiet. Not my fault everyone wants my money. You killed enough people in the trenches, you son of a bitch. The knight spat his hatred. But it was so ridiculous that I barely held back a laugh. Those guys. Every single one of them tried to kill me for my money or the cargo I was moving. If I hadn't been attacked first, then I would have just made my deliveries and been on my way. I would say the only people I attacked first were the ones trying to withhold payment. But it wasn't like I killed any of them. Quiet. You killed innocent people. Like who? These 2 guys. I pointed to the 2 corpses nearby, making him grit his teeth. Yes. And dozens of others, including my brother. None of them deserved to die. Fine. So what do you want? I spoke while throwing open the cylinder in my revolver, taking out the spent casings. My eyes remained on the knight as I did so, hearing his demands. I want you to pay for every single one of those deaths. You've robbed our families of people who can make money to support us, so you need to compensate us. I see. I suppose when I defended myself, I was too harsh. I should have at least given them a chance to live. I nodded in understanding as I filled 3 of the chambers in the cylinders with fresh bullets. It closed with a fresh click. Afterward, as the knight started to smile, I raised the peacekeeper and pulled the trigger. Asterisk bang bang bang. Asterisk. He froze as 3 more bullets buried themselves in his chest, taking a few seconds to fall over. After that, I went to each of the corpses and grabbed anything that looked valuable. One of them even had a spatial sack, though a shitty one. As I did so, I looked over to the knight. He lay there with his eyes looking at me. He was still alive, but rapidly dying. Wow. Knights really are resilient. Unfortunately for you, I don't negotiate with criminals, especially when they try to hurt me. After all, I did in fact leave some of you alive. But you guys always came back. Talk about frustrating. I've got friends too, you know. Should I just lay down and let you all rob and kill me? How convenient for you. You didn't even demand my death either. You just wanted my money. I would have respected you more otherwise. Not that it was very high to begin with. Also, I looked over, suddenly halting my words when I saw that he was dead. I let out another sigh while standing. Whatever. Time for the doctor. Making my way through the market, I found the hospital as was routine. Oh my, there's a customer I haven't seen in a while. How are you, John? The girl at the front desk greeted me with a smile while waving over a nurse. I greeted back with a grin. "Hey Kayla. Had a little run-in with some friends." "No shit. Just a leg." "Yup. Asterisk-ting asterisk." I flicked a gold coin at her, which she caught reflexively and stashed. "Right this way." She brought me to a room nearby. Like that, my leg wound was sewn together and healed. It took no more than a few minutes from start to finish. Since I was basically a regular here, I had become familiar with the nurses and doctors. They especially liked me since I tipped them for all their treatments, something nobody else did. So all my treatments were expedited. Treat them nice, and you get treated nicely, even if it cost a bit more. "Alright big guy, you're all set." "Thanks. By the way, do you have coagulants? These are good for taking care of the flesh wounds on the spot." The nurse suddenly brought out a canister with an odd nozzle and trigger on it. These can be reloaded by swapping the cans. Just spray the contents on the wound directly and it'll seal it while numbing it. It also expands so you don't need very much. Oh. This looks useful. I checked the canister out. It wasn't large, but after a demonstration, I found it very effective for the job. My recovery pills didn't operate very fast. While it could keep my body together, if I got a laceration or stab wound, I wasn't able to take care of it besides shoving a bunch of gauze inside the wound. This was the next best thing. "Give me 3 of these nozzles and a dozen canisters." "Coming right up." The nurse smiled and went off to grab me the supplies. Just like that, I was loaded with more medical supplies. Of course, it was a bit expensive, costing about 2 gold bullion. But I didn't tend to spare the expenses when it came to my safety. Yet another reason they liked me. I bought my medical stuff from them, besides the cigars. And so I walked out of the hospital and continued on to my original destination. Umara had left the city after our first day back. Since then, 3 more days had passed. The vacation given to us by the puppet master was coming to an end, and I had been fighting off hunters who still seemed eager to claim my head. I was also training with Maxwell every night. I had made good progress, constantly getting closer to a 34. In fact, I was so close that I was pretty sure I only needed 1 more night. And that's where I was headed toward. After greeting the keymaster at the hotel, I went to Polaris and found Maxwell's study. But before I even entered, I could feel a dense, comforting aura from the doors. Pushing them open, I found a chair surrounded by an odd device. It was a ring that hovered a couple feet off the ground, encircling the chair. And along the ring were 8 white crystals. "You're here. Go ahead and take a seat." Maxwell was succinct, waving me toward the chair. I just did as he said, slipping under the ring and seating myself inside of it. At the moment, I felt a dense power wash over my entire body and mind. It seemed the ring was concentrating the power of all those crystals around the chair. Not only that, but all of them were Authority 4 crystals, a level above me. This device will assist your advancement. Every 3rd advancement is important. As a summoner, your mind will open itself to vast power. Usually you would be able to drain an entire white crystal above your authority, but because you are talented, I've prepared far more than necessary. Now, listen to my instructions carefully. Maxwell instructed while tapping a few buttons on the ring. When you advance, your mind will become a bottomless pit of energy. However, it is magicka that will be infused into your body, a universal energy. Therefore, if we take advantage of this moment, you will receive boosts to more than just your mind. It is possible to infuse both vigor and mana into your body, providing you with a stronger body and even giving you a certain level of mana resistance. That's possible? I was rather surprised. The 3 types of magi weren't supposed to be able to use the powers of the others. If it was possible, then there would be people who broke the system and rose to levels unfathomable to others. Maxwell responded plainly though. It's not as amazing as you think. The power will reside in your body passively. You won't be able to cast spells or move your vigor. But it will be there, providing enhancements. Of course, it's nothing amazing either. It won't suddenly make you as strong as a knight. But it's something. Besides, we're doing this for the main benefit of flooding your body with magicka, not that. Your spark will be subject to the flood of energy. From what I've learned, it's a malleable object that can be tempered, just how a knight's body and a warlock's monocore can be tempered. However, it has to be open to the tempering. That's why tonight, you are going to entirely empty yourself of psyche. Then, we will begin your advancement. Oh. I slowly nodded. It seemed like the advancement process was complex. But I was still confused. I've never heard about this at the Magisterium. That's because it's a method exclusive to certain families, just like how my Call of the Fallen Angel is a summoning technique that stands at the top of all techniques. You think they just pass these things out for free? I guess not. I went silent. For some reason, I felt like I wasn't being told the whole truth. But we proceeded anyway. When Maxwell was finished with preparations, he looked at me. I want you to expel your psyche. This device will help you with that before reversing the process. Now, begin. He activated the device in full, and when that happened, I felt a deep vacuum force overtake my body, tugging on all the psyche in my mind. Chapter 53. After the vacuum force appeared, my body instinctively raised its defenses. 4 of the white crystals seemed entirely empty, and because all their power was contained in the space around the chair, their desire to refill ended up exerting itself on me. It was trying to suck out my psyche, which was a bit scary. But after I calmed down, I started doing as Maxwell instructed. Activating my aura, I started infusing my psyche into the air, expelling it with the fastest method I knew. I couldn't even generate a portion of the advancement formation before the psyche was ripped from my control. Like that, my psyche formed streams that refilled the crystals. And it took no more than 20 minutes to deplete nearly all my energy. My mind felt weak and disoriented. Psyche was directly tied to the mind's ability to operate, so removing all of it should end with me passing out. And sure enough, when I didn't even have the energy to resist the suction force, the rest of my psyche was whisked away. I fell unconscious, even as I thought I heard the ramblings of a crazy old man. And the next thing I felt was a force that hit my head like a truck. It felt like someone was force-feeding me as waves of magicka slammed into my body. My mind was faced with a one-sided barrage of psyche, while my body was hit with vigor that made me feel like I was burning up in mana, which made me feel in tune with the world. And on top of all that, as I was overwhelmed with psyche that my mind couldn't seem to process, my advancement began. The spark in my mind finally seemed to hit the threshold. But whereas my previous advancements ended with all my power being used to break through the barrier to the next dimension, my spark instead began to revolve with more power. I felt all the stars and lights within my mind begin to swirl like a vortex. When it did that, it felt like all of my thoughts were flashing through my mind, as if my brain were out of my control. But at the center of it all was my spark, which when faced with a mess of a host who couldn't keep control of his own thoughts, was forced to step in and bring order. And so my spark began to evolve, becoming what could be considered a second mind. The spark opened itself up to greater power, and as Maxwell had said, my mind became a bottomless pit of energy. But the influx of energy was far too overwhelming. My spark was bombarded from all sides as psyche was forced inside the empty vessel. Normally, it would take several hours for a mind to passively refill its psyche. It would pull on the magicka and the atmosphere and process it into what I needed. But now, the pressure coming from the outside was so great that psyche was forced inside without it being allowed to process things, like pressurized water shooting through a filter. And consequently, my spark was tempered, forced beyond its limits to become something better. Of course, I had to deal with the effects. For one, my mind felt like it was going to shatter. I had a headache unlike anything I'd experienced before. But at the same time, I wasn't sure if it could be classified as a headache. A mind ache? Whatever it was overwhelming. I couldn't concentrate on anything, like my thoughts were being scrambled. However, things weren't completely out of my control. With my spark being force-fed energy, I naturally regained some semblance of conscious thought. That's when I heard Maxwell shouting from beside me. Write the formation. Use your psyche. His words reached me loud and clear. Although my mind had a tornado inside of it, my senses were in fact stronger than ever. So with my spark, I made a decision and focused all of the spark's power on using my aura to write out the formation. Around me, blue lines were drawn in the air, flickering with complexity. Shockingly, it only took me a matter of seconds to draw the entire formation. Even after comprehending the entire thing, it would take me several minutes to write it out completely. But now, it felt so easy. So I continued to draw more, even drawing the practice formations Maxwell taught me that were redundantly complex. And so, thousands of different formations appeared around my body, glowing just as bright as the white crystals on the device. The psyche in my mind was drained in the process. But with the influx coming from the crystals, my reserves of energy cycled between plummeting and rising. It was like my brain was breathing. It was unlike anything I'd ever felt. At some point, I didn't even feel the pain anymore and simply devoted everything I had toward tempering my spark and mind. How long the process lasted, I had no clue. My spark was the only computer properly operating, and it was entirely devoted toward drawing formations, not counting the passing time. So I seemed to only regain full consciousness when my mind was no longer turbulent, calming and solidifying like normal. When that happened, I stopped drawing the formations. The influx of magicka was no longer able to overwhelm my mind, and my mind wasn't so open to its power. It processed incoming energy like normal, and I returned to my baseline. I stared ahead while regaining myself in a daze. I wasn't even entirely sure what had happened when thinking back. It felt like days had passed. How do you feel? Fine. I responded habitually, as if nothing had changed. But after regaining my faculties completely, I noticed several drastic effects. For one, the sheer power of my spark, and by extension my mind, was unbelievable. An entire magnitude higher, it seemed. It felt like I would have no issue killing that gorilla from the patrol back then. Unlike before, I felt so much closer to it. My weapons would be able to reach it. As for the speed of my mind, it had risen accordingly. My thoughts flowed so smooth and with such volume that I barely felt like myself. And if I had to identify the difference numerically, I would say it multiplied by about half of my mind's power, meaning a 5 times increase in speed. And on top of that, my spark had essentially become a second mind. This didn't mean I had an entirely different set of thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Instead, it was more like multitasking had become true multitasking. I could focus on 2 entirely different subjects and trains of thought at once with complete clarity. When I looked inward at my mind space, I could see the spark revolving with glistening brightness. It was also several times bigger, so instead of being the size of a marble, it was now the size of half my brain. I felt like a damn savant. I felt so clear-headed that for a moment I wondered if I could cure cancer. I also wondered if, in the case I did cure cancer, I may also figure out how to eliminate the aging of the human body. My train of thought stopped there, moving on to more important things. Along with all the enhancements to my mind, which seemed like a top-to-bottom restructuring and renovation, my body had also undergone changes. For one, I could now feel the vigor and mana within me. The vigor made me feel stronger, as it obviously would. But I also felt my lingering wounds begin to fade much faster. My metabolism also increased, and in general, I felt healthier. The benefits weren't life-changing. I don't think I would be able to match even an authority 2 knight in strength. Any knight around my level would still be able to fold me with ease like origami paper. But I had been raised above the baseline, which came with comprehensive benefits that would make my life much easier. The attainment of mana, however, came with benefits much less obvious. As I had felt earlier, I seemed to gain a certain attunement with the world. It was similar to aura, except more mystical. It was like I could more clearly feel the currents of the air around me, the moisture of the atmosphere, the temperature, the textures and attributes of the wood chair I sat on, the intensity of the light and sounds echoing through the room, and more. One way of putting it was that I was gaining information about the world around me, but instead of getting that information through my senses, I was feeling it directly. When I thought about how warlocks worked, I realized how this all operated. Warlocks affected the world around them with spells. Well, the spells required you to collect information on everything you were going to affect. To create a little sphere of water, you needed to sense the moisture of the air around you, or pull water directly from a source. If you wanted to muffle sound like Umara, you needed to sense the sound and cast a spell to affect that sound in a certain way. And sensing things through the sensory organs wasn't the same. Instead, when I focused on it, it felt like each of the different things around me, like the air, the wood, and the moisture, all had different types of mana bonded to them. It was this mana that I sensed and, if I were a warlock, could affect. That's also when I realized that warlocks didn't rely so much on their minds as they did their feelings, as odd as that sounded. It was all exciting to feel and get used to. I felt like a completely new person. At some point, I stood up and left the ring, moving around Maxwell's study and utilizing all of my new senses. I also thought about dozens of new things, exercising my mind with wonder. I barely felt like my mind was my own. It almost felt like its own entity. In my stupor, I ended up walking about the study for half an hour, not to mention how long it took to do everything else. So when I found myself looking at Maxwell, who stood there observing me, I zoned in and asked a question. Was this method of advancement standard in any capacity? No. It was purely experimental. I derived this theoretical method a few years ago but never had anyone to test it with. Luckily, you're the perfect person to do so with. So you used me for one of your crazy ideas. I did. In fact, the techniques you use to practice your call are also entirely new, made long after I created the call itself. But because I couldn't practice it myself, it remained untested. So far, you're proving all of my theories and ideas correct. I'm rather proud of myself. I hummed with narrowed eyes. I was right. I was a guinea pig for this old man's crazy experiments. While the results couldn't be argued with, I didn't really like being lied to and unknowingly risking my life and future. But I didn't say anything about it. I very quickly realized that, besides the dirt cheap payment I gave him for teaching me, this was the price I paid for the power he gave me. The call of the fallen angel was, supposedly, one of if not the best summoner call there was. And he gave this to me. He gave me the techniques to practice controlling my aura. He gave me the white crystals to power my advancements. He bought my coat which had saved my life on numerous occasions, a coat which I still didn't know the cost of since it was so high. Now, he had provided 8 authority for white crystals, along with a ring device, to power an advancement that had brought me a dozen steps forward in power. And he would continue to guide me in the future. All that, just for being a guinea pig to some new ideas founded upon very tangible techniques and theories. To say I was benefiting greatly was an insult to his generosity. "John," he called, catching my attention. His eyes were deep as he spoke. "There has yet to be a single summoner that has reached authority 12. Did you know that?" "No." I shook my head, quite shocked. As far as I knew, there were multiple authorities 12 single quotas in the kingdom, and yet all of them were either knights or warlocks. Maxwell himself had reached authority 11, but something happened to bring him back down. Still, it seemed his ambition never died as he gave me an explanation. "We summoners are far behind the knights and warlocks. We are considered good for nothing more than being thinkers. While honorable, using our power for such mundane tasks is an insult to the majesty of Psyche itself. Our potential merely needs to be realized, and across decades I have been trying to forge a path to the top. My call is the best simply because it utilizes an entirely different system of summoning, utilizing Psyche in a far more fluid manner that gives incalculable advantages. But that is only half the battle. The other half is the advancements themselves. I cannot explain it to you right now. You simply wouldn't be able to understand. But just know that right now, you are several steps ahead of any summoner at your level. You could easily match authority 5 summoners an entire level above you. And yet, that is merely normal progress. It is every other summoner that has their growth and power stunted from the very beginning. Even I was not able to escape that fate. But you are the first to deviate from that path. I can already see the difference. Maxwell's eyes glowed as he looked at me. It felt like he could see through me completely, his aura blossoming with power I couldn't fathom. Before him, there was nothing I could hide. Did you know that your spark is different as well? The formations I have given you are all my own creations. Normal summoners have sparks as well, but they develop only 2 throughout their lives. The first is started as an Authority 3 and finished as an Authority 5. And the second one is only created at Authority 10. But you will go through 3 phases of evolution, completing 2 sparks and then amalgamating them, evolving them, expanding them until they envelop your entire mind, ascending it to another level entirely. This will be done by the time you are an Authority 10. How could any other summoner possibly compare? I recoiled a bit at Maxwell's aggression. It was a bit scary, but I completely understood him. Summoners were too far behind. We were weak. Even with our power of the mind, across so many decades and centuries we had failed to figure out a better system and produce an Authority 12. Compared to the knights and warlocks, we were pathetic. And it was ironic since we were supposed to be the smart ones. But Maxwell was paving the path all by himself, despite no longer being in his prime. He was devoting his life to finding the light at the end of the tunnel, something which nobody had been able to do before. He was the saving grace of the entire summoner class. It was no wonder he engaged in his study so fanatically. And compared to all that, who cared about lying to some random kid to test out the theories? The results would be worth far more than even his life. I understood all this, and so my perspective flipped. But after his excited outburst, Maxwell caught himself. Never mind. Forget what I said. Look, the formations I've given don't deviate that much from the standard. There's minimal risk and I've run personal tests as best I could. Maxwell. I called, putting a halt to his ramblings. It's fine. I understand what you're doing. So don't worry about it. I'll cooperate with everything fully. I'm okay with being the experiment. Are you sure? The risks are indeed minimal, but should something go wrong, it may harm your future and talent. What I do is for the future of the entire summoner class, even going so far as to potentially be the last bolster of strength humanity needs to defeat the scourge. But you are your own person. I will not force you down this path, which may seem hypocritical considering my half-truths. But everything you've done up until now is completely sound. From here on out, I am no longer as certain. Are you willing to take the risks and place your future in my hands? He looked me in the eye solemnly, clearly concerned about my answer. I could tell how important this was to him, but I wasn't doing this for that reason. Instead, when I thought about the scourge and the prospect of defeating them, I realized that what I was doing was something with importance beyond myself. This wasn't just about getting stronger. It was about blazing a path to hope for all summoners, maybe even humanity. Because even if I had to sacrifice my future, I would provide crucial information that would allow other summoners to garner success where I failed. History and success were paved through sacrifice. Ancestors before us would give their lives so that their sons and daughters could become better than them, live better than them. What I was doing was no different. Maxwell had sacrificed decades so that his successor would be able to go farther than he did. I had stepped into that role, now. However, there may come a time where I would need to sacrifice something in order to pave the way for someone else, because it wasn't certain that I would succeed. So I wouldn't back down now. I looked back at Maxwell with a strange sense of confidence. I'll place my future in your hands, even if the outcome is uncertain. I just hope that I can meet your expectations. You already have, son. I froze up a bit as Maxwell looked at me with uncharacteristic love in his eyes. But then his own eyes suddenly widened as he cleared his throat. My apologies. Forget that. Now, tell me everything different you feel. After that you can go home and rest. Sure. Deciding to look past that awkward moment, I did my best to explain everything I was feeling with my mind and body. After that, I was let go. When I left the Polaris headquarters though, I saw that the sun was rising. Checking my clock, I saw that nearly 9 hours had gone by. Damn. And he stood there for that entire time. I whistled a bit, impressed. Since it was morning, school was about to begin, and I was no longer on vacation. Thankfully, I felt completely awake, like I had slept for 2 days straight. So I went directly to the magisterium, where I finally got to see my wonderful girlfriend again. Chapter 54. This girl is actually going to class. What a nerd. I laughed when I read the message on my aerial. I got to the magisterium a bit late, so classes had already started and Umara was a diligent student. I had wanted to skip school with her, but since she was already there, I decided I may as well go through classes too. Funnily enough, I was completely engaged. I felt like everything was far easier to understand. When I recalled all the information I had been taught, everything just slid into place. Because of that, all those subjects became so much more interesting to me. Thinking about those things also led me to think about all the classes and subjects I had studied on Earth. Another feature of my advancement was better memory, which allowed me to remember and recall things with much greater clarity. It wasn't perfect, but I was pretty sure there would be a time in the future when I really would have perfect memory. So when I recalled several different topics and scientific disciplines, I was able to both understand them and get some ideas. Earth was well into its modernity. At least, America was. But that meant that all that information was at my disposal. Even though I couldn't recall everything since I didn't know everything to begin with, that didn't mean I couldn't introduce certain things to this world. Electronics, industry, even some obscure scientific concepts. I was pretty sure I had invaluable knowledge to contribute to any industry in this world. I just needed to pick which one, and I already had some ideas. San had already shown me the door to his company. If I went to him with some knowledge he could use to either improve his products or completely revolutionize the industry, then there was no reason he wouldn't take me in on the spot. Of course, this would all be for money. There really wasn't any other benefit to doing it. After all, it would take an entire lifetime for certain pieces of technology to develop and mature. I wouldn't be able to see the finished products in my lifetime, so I could only benefit from short-term innovations. Not that any of that would happen right now. My top priority was simply increasing my power. For the foreseeable future, that's all I had to care about. Money wasn't an issue, for now. With those thoughts, I ended the school day. That's when I texted Umara to meet me somewhere on campus. I waited around, leaning on a wall near a doorway that students used to exit the classroom building. Soon, I saw Umara walk out. I whistled at her. "Whoa, who's that hottie?" Umara spun around, as did several other people nearby. They all looked at me, then at Umara, who realized what was happening and started to flush red. She dipped her head and walked over, headbutting my chest. "Why? You're cute when you're embarrassed." "I can't help it." I laughed and gave her a hug. "Hey, so how about a date tonight?" "Wait, really? Tonight?" "But we're going to skip training. Since your mother said I can take you on a tour, I've decided to do so." I smiled and recalled one of our conversations. Umara and I hadn't gone 3 days without talking to each other. In fact, we were texting at almost every available moment while calling during our nights. During that time, she had told me about what her mother told her. I intended to take Duchess Hilaria's warning very seriously and keep Umara out of my business, and not just because I was scared of her warning. I understood Umara's identity clearly now and knew that there were certain lines she couldn't cross. Getting involved with the black market was one of those lines. But you didn't have to get involved to be there. With me by her side, Umara would be able to expand her horizons without worrying about shady business. Of course, not only did she not certainly know that it was the black market that I was involved in, but she also had no idea what the black market even represented. It would be a jaw-dropping experience, surely. Skip training. Umara asked surprisedly, making me smirk. What, are you scared? Shut up. I'm just concerned about what the puppet master will say tomorrow when we finally show up. Eh? Who cares? Now let's go. Wait. I should get dressed. No need. I laughed and dragged her out of the magisterium. Who needed to look good for the black market? She could be dressed in rags and fit in just fine. Like that, we made our way to the entrance. Along the way, I started to explain some things. So, did your mother give you a definite answer on what I do? No. Then since we're going there, allow me to enlighten you. I operate in the black markets. I gave her the answer clearly, feeling a bit weird as I said so. And she nodded slowly. I had a feeling that was the case. Yes. I'm a delivery man, and the cargo I deliver ranges wildly. I don't ask questions, simply bringing a package from one place to another while collecting payment. Oh. So what's the weirdest thing you've delivered? That's a hard question. I'd say one that's definitely up there is a finger. Huh? A finger? Yes, an actual severed finger. Ooh. She cringed, making me chuckle. Yay, well, that was only once. Anyway, the place I'm bringing you to now is the largest black market in the kingdom. There are only a few ways to get in, and this is one of them. I think you'll like it. Making my way down a street with Umara's hand in mine, we promptly arrived at our first stop. Welcome to the Golden Trading Post. Oh, I know this place. Umara jumped excitedly, and her knowledge of this place didn't surprise me. It was an extremely popular trading spot and it wasn't actually within the black market. Her knowledge of it saved me my breath. Alright, makes my job easy. This place is popular, but it's also a front. One of the official entrances is here. Come on. Pulling her along, we arrived at a busy food shop. That's where I called out. Chef Black. Huh? Oh. It's John. Ha ha, how are you, kid? The big chef walked over to us, giving me a handshake and looking at Umara beside me. And who's this? This is my girlfriend, Chef. I'm Tally. Pleasure to meet you, Chef. Ho ho, how fun. The chef chortled as Umara gave a curtsy with an alias, bowing a bit in response. Then he chuckled at me. A girlfriend, huh, John? It's about damn time. Well, had to find the right one, you know? Ho ho, how bold. Well, anyone who can catch John's eye must be something special. Here. Allow me to treat you. Marching back, Chef Black grabbed us both kebabs with some juicy cubes of meat on it. We took them with smiles, taking a bite. Oh, it's good. Ha ha, much appreciated. Chef Black gave a fancy bow, making us laugh. After that, he waved us through the door in the back. Alright, I won't hold up your date. Head on in. Thanks, Chef. For your troubles. *ting. I flicked a gold coin at him, which he caught before raising his hat toward us. Many thanks, friend. With a wave, I pulled Umara into entrance. I also shifted from holding hands to linking arms, which she took happily. Before I even arrived, the secondary door was opened for me. The man on the other end greeted me. John. Hey Gavin. Enjoy your time inside. He ushered us in, and like that we entered the black market proper. I whispered to her. Prepare to have your mind blown. Is it that amazing? You'll see what I mean. I chuckled, and soon, we arrived at the main plaza. Bang. Both of us suddenly stopped walking as a man flew out of a bar door and rolled across the floor at our feet. Another man then came running out, barreling toward his adversary with hate in his eyes. You better pay for that fucking beer, you cheap sack of shit. Fuck you. Sheesh. I clicked my tongue. There was always someone fighting out here. Umara was observing with shock too. I pulled her along though, not particularly caring to watch a drunken brawl. After that, I brought her through a few streets that were lined with establishments of all kinds. It was like the city, except not nearly as orderly. At first glance it seemed festive with all the floating lights and activity, but most of the people here were always looking for something exciting to occupy themselves with. This plaza was where those people came together and had what they considered fun. As we walked, I pointed out some of the unique places. That's a smithy. They can make armor, but it's cheap crap. That's a tailor. They're actually pretty decent. Oh, that restaurant made me vomit, so I wouldn't recommend it. And that place is where I bought my citizenship. How interesting. Umara mumbled with barely disguised disappointment, causing me to laugh. Ha ha. You're so cute. Come on, let's keep going. I pulled her along, and she followed almost reluctantly. It looked like Umara was having her worldview shattered in real time. The more I showed her, the less impressed and more disgusted she became. Sure, the black market had some cool stuff. But it was all surrounded by degeneracy and idiots. Her face was especially great when we passed by a brothel street. Although we didn't go through it, just one glance made her face warp into a sight to behold. We walked around for around an hour, and it was only when I brought her to a nice dessert place that she finally got some relief. I watched as she chowed down on a small slice of cake. So? Mind blown? You're so mean. Here I am thinking it's some mysterious haven for rich people, and then you show me what I can only describe as a scummy rat hole of the city. PFFT. Well, that's not totally inaccurate. I chuckled and poked my finger out, taking some frosting off her cake. I tasted it and nodded. That's good. Here. Suddenly, she raised her fork with a piece of cake on it. I smiled and opened my mouth, letting her feed me. Millimeters yummy. Yeah, what a dork. She giggled while taking another bite. I continued to watch her for a bit before muttering. So, your first assumption isn't entirely wrong. This is just one of the markets. It's called the Founders Market. The other one is called the Black Spider Market, and it's basically exactly what you're expecting. Damned rich, over-the-top fancy, and ushers some of the most influential people in the kingdom. Oh. We should go there. Don't worry. That's our next stop. I just wanted to show you where I work. Well, I don't really work here, but you know what I mean. Where do you work then? She asked while finishing the cake, both of us standing to leave. I shook my head. It's a place called the Trenches, and we're not going there. It's basically everything you've seen except 100 times worse. It's dangerous, headed by a psychotic asshole, and you get high on whatever drugs are in the air just by stepping foot into its territory. That's the last place I'd ever bring you. Oh. So why do you work there if it's so bad? Because I get paid like a pimp. What? The paychecks are large. Anyway, we should head out. Linking arms, I led Umar out of the Founders Market and back into the city. We didn't go straight to the hotel though. Instead, I brought her back to the Magisterium. Back here? Is the date over? As if. Now's the time to get dressed nice. We're heading to dinner. Oh. Alright, I'll go get ready. With a rosy face, Umar ran to her room while I retreated into mine. I threw on a nice suit after cleaning up, applying just a dash of cologne that I bought from the tailor I got the suit from. Once I felt I was ready, I left my room and headed toward the Magisterium's gates, tapping my aerial and pulling up a number. Soon, Umara exited the dorms. When I saw her, I was actually stunned. She came out in a dark purple dress that wrapped around her torso before flowing down into a slim, free skirt. It was simple, with no flamboyant frills, sparkles, or accessories. Yet, it seemed to be expertly handmade to fit her body perfectly. And it matched her purple eyes so well. Alongside her done-up hair and a hint of makeup, she looked so amazing that I was rendered speechless. She brushed her hair behind her ear while walking over to me. I didn't overdress, did I? You're absolutely beautiful. Thank you. She smiled as I took her hand, entwining our fingers and making our way to the gates. There, a carriage awaited, one I had called on my aerial. It was luxurious, one that I had seen diplomats and rich merchants use while riding through the city. And our destination was the same as many of those influential figures. Black Spider Hotel. I spoke, and soon, the carriage moved. I felt hardly any vibrations while we drove, making me smile since many of these rides could be uncomfortable. Then, I looked back at Umara. I couldn't seem to take my eyes off her. Damn. You're making me feel like a bum. Nonsense. You look great. I just feel like I've gone a bit too far. I picked out one of my nicer dresses. No, I need to be able to match my girlfriend, not bring her down. I just have yet to go to the tailor and buy a good suit. I thought about the tailor the keymaster recommended to me. I didn't care about the cost, but I had been occupied lately with fending off hunters and advancing to authority 4. I regretted that I didn't make the time earlier. My suit was still nice. I had a white shirt, black slacks, nice dress shoes and a blazer. I definitely wasn't underdressed, but a dress like hers could only be matched by a fancy tuxedo. Well, I didn't worry about it that much. Still, I would need to correct this small issue the first chance I could. After a bit more talking, we arrived in front of the Black Spider Hotel. Before getting out, I took out my platinum bank card, tapping it on a device the driver used to receive his payment. He spoke when I did so. Have a good night. You too, man. With a wave, I stepped out and took Umara's hand, helping her down the carriage before linking arms. And so we stepped into the hotel, the first person to greet us being the keymaster. He smiled widely as he saw me approach. Good evening, John. And good evening, Lady Umara. Hello, keymaster. Good evening, keymaster. Umara curtsied, making the keymaster clap with a smile. You both look dashing. Off to taste the delicacies of the Black Spider Market? And a little tour. I wish I could bring her to an auction, but we missed the last one. Well, they happen every month. Surely you'll be able to make one soon. Until then, there is still much to see. Definitely. I nodded, and suddenly, one of the elevators nearby dinged and opened. The keymaster waved us toward it. I won't hold you longer. Please, enjoy your night under the stars. Will do. We bowed toward each other a bit before separating. After entering the elevator, I inserted my key and dialed in the numbers. Like that, we were taken to our destination. While it happened, Umara asked, "Who's that? You two seem friendly." That's the keymaster. He's responsible for providing rooms in the hotel, as well as handing out the keys to allow entry into the market. He also helped me a lot when I first came here, so I owe him. I see. Also, I saw that card you pulled out in the carriage. My mother has one of them that looks just like it. That doesn't surprise me. I smirked a bit as the elevator doors suddenly opened. And we stepped out, greeted by the floating lights and stone brick streets of the Black Spider Market. Umara's eyes sparkled as she looked around at the opulent buildings and rich individuals that walked down the sidewalks. Welcome to the Black Spider Market. It's nice. Now this is what I was expecting. She laughed as we started walking, excited to see a mystical place that didn't resemble the slums. Along the way I pointed out some of the places we passed like the Polaris Bank. I also explained some things to her, such as my bank card and the auctions I had mentioned. The auctions sound interesting. Are the items really valuable there? Let's just say that the people who buy stuff from it are far richer than I am. Oh. And just how rich are you? Hey now, what if you just want to use me for my money? I poked her in the side, obviously joking around. She could probably move far more money than I could any day. Sure enough, my words made her chuckle mischievously. Ho, maybe I just want to know if my boyfriend needs any help. After all, the bill for tonight is sure to be big. I can handle a restaurant bill no problem, you needn't worry. And I've only stashed what I could from all my jobs. It's not enough to live like a king, but enough to pay for everything I need along with a bit of luxury. I at least don't need to work while I'm at the magisterium. Sounds like you've worked hard. Unfortunately I can't relate as the daughter of a duchess. How spoiled. Am not. I've worked very hard for my power, and unlike other nobles, I don't get showered with stipends or rich allowances. The most valuable things I have are my robes and staff. I know, I know. I wrapped my arm around her and squeezed a bit in comfort. After that, we approached the caviar restaurant. At the door, there was a host who smiled at us in greeting. Chapter 55. Good evening, John. Your table for two has been prepared. Thank you. I nodded as we were led in. Once inside, we heard the music of the small orchestra that was playing some upbeat, jazzy music. We were taken to an elevator on the wall, ascending to the 11th floor just below the private floors. There, we found a dozen or so booths with many guests occupying them. It was private enough to not worry about eavesdropping or wandering eyes, but still a public space where many people could enjoy yet another orchestra. Here though, there was a pretty singer up on stage. Her voice was soothing as she sang to the rhythm of a piano and violin. Here you are. I will be back with refreshments soon. Thank you. We took our seats. The booth wrapped around three sides of our table, partially exposing us to the stage up front. Umara sat across from me. So, do you know everyone or something? I think that host just assumed. I did make a reservation for this time. Still, we've come across a dozen people who know you like old friends. You should see the hospital. Everyone there knows me too. I chuckled a bit before explaining. I'm quite notorious in the founders market. But I've made just as many enemies as friends. After all, with my weapons, it's even easier to kill people than scourge beasts. Kill people? I thought you made deliveries? Umar looked rather shocked, making me sigh. I do, but you saw what the market was like. If I grab a box of moonshine from some drug dealer and take it to another person's house, it's not always guaranteed that they'll give me the money I'm owed. That's when I need to persuade them, and most of the time, it gets violent. Not only that, but in the trenches where everyone is drugged out of their mind, someone might just see me walking by on the street and attack me. I risk my life every time I so much as step foot into that place. Oh. She frowned at the revelation. And I watched her carefully. I was curious to see what she would think because I didn't regret anything I did for a second. I was just doing my job. It wasn't my fault that it was made dangerous by the people around me. I sure as hell wasn't the one going out and robbing people. If she really had a problem with it, then I could only regret that she wasn't mature enough to see the truth. But my judgment of her wasn't off the mark. I kind of wish I could join you on a job. Imagine how easy it would be to get rid of annoyances with me there to support you. Ha ha, that's true. But I wouldn't want to put you in that kind of danger. Hey now, that's not what you should be thinking. I trust that you'll keep me safe, just like you should trust that I can do the same for you. If you wouldn't bring me there, then you shouldn't be there either. And if you would go there, then you should want to keep me by your side. I'm supposed to be your partner, and not just when it's convenient. I was silent as she solemnly finished with dead seriousness. She brushed her hair back as she continued. That's actually something I wanted to talk with you about. That day during our patrol, I failed to protect you. I almost let you get killed just because I got distracted. That wasn't your fault, it was, and I'm not making excuses, so don't make them for me. You were 2 seconds away from leaving this world forever. What should I have done then? Should I have blamed Vetsman? Tana? You? Nothing would have mattered because no excuse would have been good enough. Regret doesn't bring back the dead. You're here because Fiden was fast, and we were all lucky. That's it. The fact I ever said that I would support you before makes me look like a complete joke. My mouth closed shut as I listened. And her words made me realize something. On Earth, soldiers were all brothers up until the modern era. There were few women, simply by virtue of physical differences and how that translated to battlefield performance. But here, there were just as many women who became magi as men. And they were very much capable of rising to attain godlike strength. The magical weapons given to them as magi leveled the playing field. And Umara would become a soldier, just like I would. After this year at the Magisterium, we would enter the kingdom's military and fight the scourge every day. We would be exposed to the same threats. I wasn't giving her due respect by protecting her, even though that was my instinct. As weird as it was, if she was going to be fighting by my side, I needed to treat her as a fellow soldier, my equal. Of course, she would be my girlfriend first. But certain situations called for certain perspectives. She spoke to me with conviction. Thankfully, I'm lucky enough that I don't have to regret. Nothing like that will ever happen again. I want you to be able to trust me, trust that even when the enemies get close, I'll be able to stop them from harming you. All right. I nodded, the two of us looking into each other's eyes. We'll work on that. I think we'll all be working on our squad's cooperation this month. And the puppet master knows exactly what we need, so we'll get our time. I just don't want you to worry so much about it. It'll work out. I'll worry as much as I need to before I can trust myself as well. But, thanks. We smiled at each other, and then, our waiter came around. What drinks can I start you with tonight? Oh, I'll take some Vasania wine and water. As for her, indigo caspa, and some water. Coming right up. We gave our orders. At the bar during our trips to and from Calatrava base, we had tried many drinks and found some good ones. Vasania wine was a rich berry wine, very tasty. An indigo caspa was a vodka drink that glowed blue and tasted oddly like pomegranate. Before long, we received a bottle for each, the waiter setting and filling the glasses. I took a sip, smiling at how good it was. I also watched Amara take 2 entire gulps of her drink, making me chuckle as she shook her head a bit. The drink's not going anywhere. I'm just warming myself up. She refuted before calming down and taking a regular sip. After that, the waiter came by and took our food orders. I got myself a large platter filled with 8 different types of meats. And Umara got herself a large slab of steak as well as a salad filled with a dozen different exotic vegetables I'd never heard of. And while we waited, we both talked endlessly. She asked me more about the black markets, along with some of my experiences. So I indulged her with stories while asking some of my own questions about her life as nobility. I learned some interesting things as a result. Nobles were people with several responsibilities. They had to manage their territories and people, while lots of them were executives in the military, which required constant attention. Duchess Hilario was one of those people, in fact. Apparently she used to be a brigadier, which was an authority 10 infantryman. But there didn't exist any ranks for authority 11 infantry, since those people were expected to take on greater responsibilities. Well, the Duchess wasn't interested in getting educated to become a marshal. So to make use of her after she became an authority 11, she was put in charge of a warlock corps. Other than the kingdom's authority 12 warlocks, she was the leading expert, especially when it came to military applications. But it wasn't like she was constantly busy. She had a certain amount of freedom, mainly because nobody could seem to tie her down to anything boring or mundane. Instead, it was her husband who had to deal with a lot of the paperwork. He had been a full-fledged rank 10 general and an authority 10 knight. It seemed he ended up using his knightly stamina working late nights taking care of correspondence on his wife's behalf. Getting to this point, I also learned that Umara wasn't an only child. She had a little sister, and not one that was only a couple years younger than her. Apparently this sister was 14 years old. Umara was 20 years old, 6 years older than her sister. I remembered that the more powerful someone was, the more difficult it became to have children. But it didn't become impossible even if siblings may be far apart in age, so given enough time, 2 strong parents would be able to have multiple children, though their talent wasn't guaranteed. From what Umara said, only the first 3 children had a strong chance to inherit the strong talent of their parents. It was proven that any more after that, and the chances of a child having any talent to even become a magus was random. So families were very important. Steps were taken in order to breed strong warriors regularly. Noble households always had strong parents and families, so being able to step into one was extremely difficult. Unless you had a relatively open-minded mother who let her daughter pursue her own chosen mate. I quickly realized that I had done something pretty rare, as the noble class would almost always pick their spouses from well-known circles. Even Umara had a whole list of suitors. Hearing that, I couldn't help but chuckle. As if there was even competition in the first place. This was a monopoly, and I was dominating the market. Umara and I continued talking even as the food was served. Although the food was amazing enough to warrant salivating silence, we also seemed to have too many things to talk about. We had already talked every day for a month now, spending hours in each other's company, texting, or calling. But we never had a dull moment. Even in times of silence, we comfortably enjoyed each other. I had never been so in tune with someone before, even really it felt like. It seemed that with every day that passed, I only continued to like her more, especially since I knew that she liked me just as much. At some point, we finished our dinner. That's when Umar looked over. In front of the stage where the musicians played was a dance floor, and there were a few couples out there. The music had turned slow to accommodate them. It seemed to be that time of the night. So after a few minutes to make sure we were both finished, I stood from our booth and put out a hand. Care to dance? I would love to. She smiled radiantly as she took my hand, the two of us moving to the dance floor. Since coming to this world I had learned to dance a little. At the very least I knew how to keep pace with my partner. Besides, we were slow dancing. The most important thing was that we were in each other's arms. My left hand held her right, and my right hand went to her waist while her left hand moved around my shoulder. We didn't speak a word as our bodies came close, practically hugging each other. Her bust pressed slightly against the upper part of my abs, giving me an intimate idea of how full it was. We rocked back and forth with the music. While she seemed a bit embarrassed at first, she was eventually able to look into my eyes with rosy cheeks. The only thing we could see was each other. After that, I simply did as I felt. When a kiss happened, someone had to make the first move. It didn't just happen, especially the first time. One of the people involved had to take the first step in. And it wasn't going to be her. She was nervous. As far as I knew, she didn't have any experience. So when I took the first step, I started by intertwining the fingers of our clasped hands. My hand on her waist then moved up, getting a hold of her back. And then, it was as simple as getting closer. Through her back, I could feel her heart beating erratically. And I didn't go all the way. I wanted her to meet me, cross the little bit of distance I left between us to seal the deal. I barely held back a smile as she boosted herself up on her toes a bit, my hand supporting her back, helping her towards me. And our lips locked. It was shallow, but sweet. I could immediately tell that she had zero experience with this. So I helped her, taking it slow and letting her feel around. We separated a few times as well, adjusting before going right back. Over time, she got more eager, pushing herself against me, her tongue going deeper and deeper. I was the one who had to stop after almost 2 minutes, pulling away reluctantly. For a moment her eyes begged me for more, but when she regained herself, she once again realized that we weren't the only ones here. But she also didn't seem to care much. Still, I wasn't interested in making out on the dance floor, so I walked her back to our table. Seeing the table full of empty plates and half-drank bottles, I looked at her. "Are we done here?" "Yes." "Let's go then." I grabbed her hand and my bottle of wine. She also grabbed her bottle of Caspa. Like that, we went back down to the entrance of the restaurant where I quickly paid for everything with a tap of the card. And so we left, making straight for the hotel while taking sips from our bottles on the way. Soon, we reached the elevator where I punched in the number for my room. We ascended, standing side by side in tense silence. When I glanced at her though, I found her stealing looks. And as if we could read each other's minds, we went straight back to kissing, unable to even wait for the room. When the elevator arrived and opened, we pulled away and walked out. I led her to my fancy room, pushing the door open and welcoming her in. She didn't say anything about how nice the room was or even the fact that I had it. Instead, she jumped on me, wrapping her legs around my waist and taking us both down to the bed after I threw the door shut behind me. I was surprised by how bold she was. It seemed she had flipped a switch, because I couldn't sense a hint of shyness, embarrassment, or shame. Not that I minded. We had been saving our first kiss for this date because it sure as hell wasn't going to happen on the military base. It was an unspoken, but definitely real agreement. So when else would we do it? The third date? The 10th. If not now, while we were hotter than ever for each other, then when? I would have done it earlier if the circumstances had been better than crappy, but a military base didn't allow that. I knew that both of us had wanted to for quite a while, but only now were we finally in the position to let loose. So we tumbled across the bed, Amara constantly learning and exploring new ways to use her tongue. It was exhilarating and passionate, filling my head with so much dopamine that I felt I was going to explode. And Amara couldn't seem to control herself as she haunted me for more. For a moment I started to doubt if she had really done this before or not. But she was definitely new at this. With Rayla, there was no mistaking her experience. But with Amara, there was zero familiarity to speak of. Fuck it. I stopped questioning things, simply indulging in the moment. And we never stopped. Even if we weren't rolling over each other, we were laid down beside each other, constantly kissing, sometimes momentarily, sometimes deeply. But we didn't go beyond that. It wasn't time yet. Not even I wanted to sleep with her right now. We would simply need time before reaching that step. Yet I couldn't help but feel that this was damn close to it. It was basically sex with our mouths, our tongues dancing around, pulling, pushing, intertwining. We communicated without words, feeling the other with unseen clarity. And it went on for so long. Glances at the clock on the wall told me that 2 hours passed before I knew it, but I simply never felt like I wanted to stop. Not to mention the boost in stamina from my recent advancement that kept me energetic. But I could tell that after a while, she started to get tired, even if she didn't want to. So I slowed it down, the two of us cuddling more. Besides, I was tired as well. I didn't forget that I hadn't actually slept the night before. Both of us started to cool down after that, no longer so ravenous. It was only at that point that she was able to talk again, her voice soft as a whisper. We don't have to go back, do we? No. We can sleep here. Millimeters, that's good. I had fun today. She let out a light breath that grazed my nose and shifted her body, pressing closer while resting her head on my chest. I combed back some of her hair as I responded. I'm glad. Now I can properly call you my girlfriend. HM, and I get to call you my boyfriend. She leaned forward after saying that, giving me a kiss on the cheek. I returned with a kiss on her forehead. After that, her heavy eyes closed as she fell asleep in my arms. I joined her not long after, falling into a deep slumber supported by the rich comfort of my hotel bed. Chapter 56. When I woke up, I was enveloped by comfort and ease. I felt amazingly rested. I had been up for almost 2 days straight since, during the time I was supposed to sleep a night ago, I instead advanced and my mind was overloaded with energy. I couldn't go to sleep even if I wanted to. But now, I had finally slept and reset my system. That rest seemed to have completely solidified the effects of my advancement, making me feel even stronger than before, perhaps smarter as well. But my mind was preoccupied with the girl in my arms. Once my eyes opened and cleared, I saw her still dead asleep. In fact, she had started drooling on my arm at some point, leaving a puddle on my sleeve. I just chuckled a bit and continued to lay there. Honestly, sometimes it felt like the touch of the person you liked or loved was just as intoxicating as any drug. Simply looking at Amara made me happy. Was I head over heels for this girl? Nah, no way. I'm in complete control of my emotions. After a while of staring and enjoying her comfort, I suddenly saw her shift a tiny bit, indicating her awakening. I smiled and leaned forward a bit, kissing her forehead. Then I kissed her cheek, her breathing hitching a bit. And then I kissed her chin, causing her hand to clutch my shirt. When my lips were planted on her neck, her breathing came out like a shiver. J. John. Ha. Good morning. I pulled away and looked at her with a smile, her ears burning red as she let out a few harsh breaths. Unlike last night though, she was no longer so daring and bold. In embarrassment, She turned and buried her face in the pillow. I laughed while climbing out of bed. Both of us were still in our attire from last night, not having bothered to take anything off or change. Perhaps we would need to engage in the walk of shame back to the magisterium. Then again, I had my coat in my spatial sack, so throwing it on would make me look normal. I looked back at Tamara. After some silence, she went from embarrassed to curious about the room. "Is this your own room?" "Yay. The keymaster gave it to me back when I had nowhere to stay." "You were homeless?" "Temporarily when I first came to the capital. I didn't have a single coin to my name back then, but the keymaster was generous enough to give me this room for free." "Wow. Honestly, it's nicer than my bedroom at our family mansion, so you got a pretty good deal." "I would agree." I nodded and looked around. This place was befit to house the famous, rich, and influential. To get a place like this anywhere else in the city would cost a massive sum of money, and I had gotten it for free. Well, I've gotten everything I have now through the generosity of many people. It will take a long time trying to repay all of them, but it'll happen one way or another. Letting out a small breath, I pointed to the bathroom. "If you need to, you can clean up in there. Do you have a change of clothes or do you want to go out and buy some?" "No, I have my robes." "Oh, good. Well, you take the bathroom first. I'll order some breakfast." "All right." She nodded and jumped out of bed, heading into the bathroom. While she did that, I ordered some room service, getting a breakfast platter. And it didn't take long to get here. I heard a knock on the door by the time Umar came back out in her robes. "Here you go, sir. Call if there's anything else you need." "Thank you." I took the cart that was rolled in, bringing it over to my dining area. The wall closest to the dining area was entirely made out of glass from floor to ceiling, so we were able to eat while taking in the view of the morning city from so high up. "Oh, smells good." Umara smiled and sat down, digging in with me. While we ate though, I looked out toward the two most eye-catching buildings in the city. The Royal Palace and the Magic Spire. They were the tallest buildings in the city, the Royal Palace being particularly bold and grandiose with its golden exterior and artistic depictions across the pillars and walls of its construction. The spire was similarly prestigious, created of dark crystal and enchanted profoundly. The magisterium wasn't far from that place, but the two seemed worlds away. I had heard much about the spire. It was a place most warlocks aspired to go. It was humanity's single greatest magic innovation center. I believed Sun worked from there as well. However, since warlocks were coveted in the military, it was difficult to get into the spire. It was mainly for the dedicated researchers. In fact, I believed that the majority of people within the spire were summoners, not warlocks. Suddenly, I remembered something and broke the silence. "Hey, I wanted to ask you about something." "Sure." "Summoners have sparks that strengthen our mind and psyche. What do warlocks have?" "Oh, we have mana hearts. We accumulate mana in our hearts and that mana gets circulated through our blood, allowing us to intimately connect with the world around us. But there are different systems of spellcasting dictated by how we layer our mana hearts through our advancements." "I see. So, is the term tempering familiar to you?" I asked, thinking back to Maxwell's explanation. Warlocks and knights were supposed to have a system of tempering, something summoners didn't have which stunted their growth. Sure enough, Umar nodded. "Yes, though it's a very rare path to take and not exactly well known. My mother allows me to, but she tells me that I can't tell anyone about it." "But, how do you know about it?" "Maxwell, my teacher. He helped me carry out some tempering during my recent advancement." "Ah, I knew something felt different. So you advanced. Congratulations." Umara smiled and cheered, but after a few more seconds, her face suddenly fell. "Wait, summoners don't have tempering. I'd like it if you kept this a secret for now, but my teacher has created a way to temper a summoner's spark." "Oh, that's revolutionary. Summoners are notoriously weak because they are unable to temper themselves like knights and warlocks can. It has prevented them from ever reaching authority 12. If that changes, the whole of humanity will benefit. Maybe. But, I wanted to ask about how warlocks temper themselves, see how my tempering would match up. I asked, wanting more information. I didn't know much about how knights and warlocks worked. And Umara started describing her own tempering experience. It seemed similar to mine. By gathering multiple white crystals above your own authority, you could concentrate magicka and use it to temper yourself during an advancement while your body was completely open to its power. However, it seemed that Umara's tempering was drastically toned down from my own. Whereas I was surrounded by 8 white crystals, all of which had their powers concentrated by a device, and had all my psyche drained in its entirety, she only had 3 white crystals and also didn't drain herself of mana. Apparently the ring device was common enough for those who had the money and connections to get one for advancements. But everything else about her tempering was watered down. I felt like I was going to die at one point during the tempering, but she had very mild pain. Not only that, but she didn't even know that she could enhance her body with psyche and vigor. Since her tempering was easier, it was arguable if her body was enhanced by those 2 energies at all, though I was inclined to believe she still received some. So it begged the question. Why was her tempering so much more mild than my own? Maxwell was basing the tempering according to how the other magi did it, merely adapting it to summoners. Was he just being more extreme? Or was Umara's tempering not extreme enough? Because we were both aware of tempering, there wasn't any need to hide things. I told her about the differences between our experiences, and she too quickly figured out that something was wrong. I created a mana core during my Authority 2 and 3 advancements. Then I merged them during my advancement to Authority 4 to create the foundation for my mana heart. That's when I conducted the tempering with my mother. So it seems like tempering is supposed to occur during every 3rd advancement, but I don't know why mine was weaker than yours. I don't believe my mother would withhold anything from me. Maybe you should ask her. Perhaps there's something different about warlocks and summoners that requires different intensities. I doubt it, but I'll wait to ask. No matter what, my first tempering has already passed. In fact, I'm close to Authority 5. Oh, that's good. Think you'll have it before the next trip? Millimeters. She nodded while taking a bite out of some eggs over easy. I smiled and watched her, going through the rest of breakfast before deciding to head out. By now, classes had already long started. Not that I cared. As a good delinquent, I took my sweet-ass time going back to the magisterium, where me and my girlfriend went straight to the dorms. Once inside, she nudged me. Hey, let me see your room. You got to see mine. Huh? I don't mind, but we were just in my other room. I'd think it's a lot nicer than here. Just show me. Okay. I looked at her weirdly while entering my dorm room. And as soon as the door closed, she jumped on me while sealing our mouths. Oh, so that's what she wanted. Chuckling as she wrapped her legs around my waist, I went and placed her back against a wall, propping her up and going to town. And that's when I learned that she was a very fast learner. Compared to last night, she seemed like a pro. Still, I was shocked at how eager she could get. With how embarrassed she always got when I teased her or showed her some love, I figured she was just more innocent or reserved. But my goodness. This girl could get dirty. After pinning her against the wall for a while, she eventually pushed off and brought us to the bed where we continued. And we didn't stop until one of my alarms went off around an hour later, signaling the time to head over to our training. So after we reluctantly pulled away from each other, we cleaned up and left the dorms. Oh, we should go see the leaderboard. That's right. I wonder what place you're at. Suddenly remembering how I was now an elite, we both went and checked the leaderboard where I would be placed. The leaderboard was located in the school's secondary plaza near the west wing. There, the board was held between 2 marble pillars. I looked at the silvery white metal frame that had 32 names atop it. And there, in 11th place, was my name with 490 points next to it. I nodded with a pleased expression. Not bad, if I do say so myself. For only going on one trip, it's amazing. keep going like that and you'll reach the top of the leaderboard. Though, I'm surprised that there's also 3 others who become elites. Umara looked at the bottom of the leaderboard where 3 more names were added along with mine. While she was occupied though, I suddenly turned and looked around. There were always plenty of students within the plaza, but I was noticing how many eyes the 2 of us were pulling. With my aura I could sense the curiosity in the gazes of all the younger students, wondering who I was. I could also sense a lot of boys staring at Amara. At first, I was simply amazed at how acute my senses and attunement to aura had become. But the next moment, I found myself smirking. I suddenly took Umara's hand in my own, raising it and kissing the back of her fingers. Wait, why? She looked at me with a flushed face, her eyes darting around to all those around us, seeing all their whispers and giggles. I didn't respond, intertwining our fingers before pulling her to the training grounds. There, we found most of the other elites waiting around by the puppet master's outpost. The rest of our squad was included. As we walked over, I felt Umara's hand clutch my own a bit harder. I could imagine that it was a bit nerve-wracking to be so open about our relationship in front of friends, but at the same time, what would it mean if we let go? That we were afraid to tell people? Well, I think we were beyond that with everything that had happened in recent days. Still, even I was a bit embarrassed as I saw Vetsman and Fiden chuckle mischievously. Look at these 2. Where were you guys yesterday? I knew it. Tana shouted from behind the men, as if she hadn't been completely oblivious a week ago. I laughed a bit as Umar tried to hide behind me. We were having fun not getting our asses kicked by the puppet master. Yay? Well, you're in for a good surprise. John. Suddenly, there was a yell as the puppet master came stomping out of his outpost. I scratched my head as he approached. Where were you 2 yesterday? Actually, I don't want to know. But since you skipped the scenario, your squad gets to do a hard one today. Now get ready. Well shit. I cursed as we were all mercilessly enveloped by a pulling force, teleporting into the scenario. Today was going to be a long day. Tobe continued,